Welcome back, everybody. Another edition of the Organics Q&A with Mr. Tad Hussey and myself. How you doing today, Tad?
I'm great. We have a beautiful sunny day here in Washington State, which is not not the common thing. So yeah, we're all in good moods here in Washington, feel like.
Yeah, it was to my surprise when I've been out in the Denver area for the DGC Cup, the Do Grows Cup. This one in Longmont, Colorado. It was freaking awesome. It was over this past weekend. It was 3 days long. They did a fire competition. They did a hash bash as well. But when I was boarding, I got home at 1:30 this morning. But last
Oh
night when we
geez.
touched down on the tarmac, they're like, or no, it was when before we were leaving. And he says, the local weather in Seattle is 82 degrees. I was like, what the heck? I'm glad I'm still in my shorts from hot Colorado, but I didn't see that coming.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the cup real quick? Because I'm kind of curious, like what's it like compared to
Yep.
other cups you've been to?
Yep. So absolutely my favorite cup. Last year was my first year. It was my favorite cannabis event that I've ever been to because everybody there is excited. It is all home growers, people who like really love the plant, and everybody just wants to share. It's like you have that thing that you're proud of. You want to see people that, like online. You're like, dude, I really want your opinion, or, like, I'd love to share my flower with you. And just it was so easy to start a conversation anywhere you went. And that's the beautiful thing about it. And that's not every competition. So that's what kind of made me fall in love with it last year. And this year, so last year was about 400 people. This year, new venue. The flower day was like about 500 people. Same vibe. So that was awesome. And the Do Grow show, I mean, they pull it off very well. There's not a hitch, except for there was a fire on the hash bash day, which is interesting. I mean,
Was it related to smoking or was it totally an unrelated fire?
no, 100% absolutely related. It was the dab bar caught on fire. So yeah, me and untrained astronaut, there was a little loft up above everything where, like, camera crews, we had all the equipment and stuff up there. But we were just up there having a chat before we were heading down. The day was just getting started. And we hear somebody just yell, fire down there. And we're like, all right, somebody, found some good stuff. And a couple seconds later, another person yells, fire. We're like, wow, they're getting really pumped up down there. And then it was just a chorus of like, fire, fire. We're like, we looked at each other. And as soon as someone said, it's getting out of control, get the extinguisher, we like jumped up and we caught some flame or some waist high flames, but apparently
Yeah.
the isopropanol fell over and there's an open flame torch, and well, that
Oh
will set things
geez.
on fire. Yeah,
Yeah, we almost
it's
need
a good
another
argument for
word for it.
e-rigs.
Like
What's that?
inferno or like some other word for fire so people know you're actually talking about a real fire that's dangerous.
Yeah, I legitimately thought somebody down there just took like the raddest hit of their life. It was like fire. So
Oh
that
boy.
was yeah, that was the highlight. That was but my point of going into that was when everything runs so smoothly, it's almost like production or anything. The better you do your job, the less people notice because everything just goes smooth. And that's what their events have been the last 2 years. So the fire was excitement, though. I mean, it's going to lead to some good jokes for years to come.
Well, I'm laughing, but I assume no one got injured. Everything was they're okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the only reason why you can laugh is
Okay.
nobody got injured. Property damage was almost, non-existent. Fortunately, again, it was more of liquid burning than material. But yeah, there's a little bit of damage, but yeah,
Good.
nothing too bad. They had huge industrial fans in there. So, like, I mean, the dab bar. So, within like 15 minutes of that happening, all of the dab competition was already moved outside under the tent, didn't skip a beat. But yeah, they closed that area down for the rest of the day because they had big industrial fans and it was just getting everything out of there. Did it really quickly. But yeah, we're like, yeah, keep the fire stuff outside maybe next time or get e rigs.
Yeah. I've kind of wondered about some of the logistics around because we're going to be having a tasting event at our conference this year in September in Bozeman. And I'm a little nervous about it. Like, what if there is a fire? Or how do we get all these people
Plan.
back to their hotels?
Yep.
Even just some of those logistics.
As a person who threw, a lot of music events and nightclubs, I mean, those things are absolutely considerations. Consider where your exits are. Do you have the potential fire source blocking the exit and the rest of the place? Fire extinguishers, protocol. Events like that, you're going to have staff, somebody who, at least one or two people whose job is just to kind of roam around, make sure they know what would happen. It's, again, we go back to SOPs, and that's
Yeah.
uh yeah, and that's actually one of the questions that I have here. Um, Start here. I mean, we could get to Grow Talk, guys. Everybody in here, yeah, Fourth House Genetics. Glad
I did.
everybody's okay. And I just want to say Fourth House Genetics will be on the show Saturday with me. So I just wanted to put him up there. And yeah, Untrained Astronaut, I see him in here. And I don't know if you joined the part where I was explaining the story, but yeah, it was me and Untrained Astronaut. What plant Chronic Wonder is wondering
Yeah.
which won the DGC Cup? It was a Mac 1. They just posted it on the Do Grows Instagram, the 1 through 10. Another thing I like about it is they do an intake form and they ask people, how did you grow it? So there's organic, there's salts, and there's synganic. And I believe that's actually how the top three went. It was funny when Scotty Rio would announce, like the top 10 and the winner and, how they grew, and he'd be all, and salts, like saying it all provocative. It was funny. But yeah, organic, salt, synganic was the 1, 2, and 3. Good competition, man. Good competition. It was
Now,
76 flower samples,
oh, sorry.
and
Keep
then
going.
yeah, 76 flower samples and a little over 25 dab samples. Again, 2 different days. But the thing about this competition is it's a blind competition. It's a blind taste test with everybody who paid to be there. So you get like a cool Do Grows oney when you get in there. You go around to all of the stations, smoke as much as you want. You drop your little tokens in the bag for the ones that you think are the best, and then they count up the tokens. So I do like that system. It's pretty, democratic. Everybody truly does pick the winner, and it's amazing how close the top three always are.
See, here's my, because I think a lot about cannabis. And again, I'm not a consumption expert. I've made that very
Mm-hmm.
clear. I'm definitely on the cultivation side. But
Mm-hmm.
from talking to Jeremy Plum and people who try to do this as like scientifically as possible, because it's a very sensory experience. If you smoke weed on a hike versus in the middle of a conference room, like you're going to have a very different experience based on your environment. Granted,
Oh
those
yeah.
are extreme examples. So the way they did their cup when they were doing it in Portland was the judges would all go home with blind samples and they
Mm-hmm.
would consume it over the period of like a month. And they were asked to
Yep.
consume them all at the same place in the same mindset as much as possible to try and remove those variables. Because, like, if I went into like a really hype booth, the weed looked really nice, I'm probably going to vote higher for that than, say, something that looks like swag, but maybe is really good. Or, maybe the
Yeah.
presentation or the packaging isn't, you know what I mean? Like all of those things kind of
Yep.
come into play. Or that third hit that you take in the day is probably you're probably be a better mood by then than that first one you started off. So I think positioning in the room would make a difference too. I don't know. Lots of variables.
It absolutely can, because there's so many things that can influence us, even down to the packaging, like you mentioned. And this again, it was very, there were non-partial bud tenders, and it was just big conference tables laid out with all of the samples. There was a jar of the finished flower, and then what those, the bud tenders who weren't attached to any of the strains. Again, there's no packaging, no logo, just a glass jar and a
Mhm.
tray. They always had some freshly ground on that tray. So you just kind of come up, plug your oney in it, take a hit, and move on to the next one. So
Are
position
the bud
does,
tenders moving around? Because like I could think maybe the most charismatic or the most attractive bud tenders might influence you even too. I don't know.
potentially. I don't know. People were just, I don't even think people were looking at the bud tenders. They were, they were head down in the samples.
Fair.
It was pretty awesome. It was funny, and of course you do meet the people who are like, I tried every single one. I'm like, how do you do that? But yeah, the dab competition, I didn't even try any of the samples on the hash day. I still had, again, there were so many awesome people there that were excited about their flower. And they're like, dude, I'd really love to give you this.
Yeah,
And that's what I stayed like Sunday. I was puffing on that. Allegedly, I still am puffing on a lot of that. So it was it was cool. And flower, I'm always been a flower guy, but it gave me room to talk to people and ask people. I'm like, okay, so compared to what you normally have, or compared to what's at your average rec store, how do these competition entries stack up? And there were some people who mentioned BHO and they could tell it wasn't quite purged correctly by a few different metrics of their own. That was something that I
hmm,
heard from disconnected people throughout the day. But I also, the primary thought was, yeah, the competition here is definitely trying to win. So there was some good stuff there.
that's awesome. I've heard some people say they can tell the difference between salts and organics. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, again, not being a, not being someone who's particularly a connoisseur in that regard, I don't think I could, but I think that's an interesting conversation.
It is because there's as the, again, as the audio guy, the audio file is like, oh, I could tell the difference between a CD and an MP3, and because it's compression for people who don't know, and for someone who's actually a trained ear, myself, I typically can, but it's based off of compression, which takes time to figure out. So it's a very small percentage of people that truly can. Um, but yes, good grown plant is a good grown plant. And there were two clear
Mm.
examples of that kind of along these lines for me this weekend. Is one, the Herbs Now dryer. It almost looks like a food dehydrator. I've known several people that have used it. They didn't have bad things to say, and I haven't poo-pooed it because I've never tried it. But someone there brought flour that they had just quick dried in that product. I was impressed. If they didn't tell me, never would have known the difference. I had two
Hmm.
people whip out bags of, auto flowers, and they even told me it was auto flowers before handing it to me. I smelled the bag. I was like, wow. I took out the bud and looked at it. I'm like, again, never would have known if you didn't tell me. So there's a lot of stuff that we think we'll know, but in truth, a good grown plant's a good grown plant.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I agree. Well, let's get
Yep.
into it. Sorry, I've been asking you too many
Yeah.
questions about this conference, but that's so cool. I'm glad you had fun, and I got to make it out one of these years. That sounds great.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And we'll get to your conference coming up soon, because I think people who enjoyed that one will also love this one, because again, people there were so eager just to learn and share and be around each other. And I know there's going to be a lot of information and knowledge exchanged at yours. So everybody always wants to step it up. And we did get a question here from Jeff. Guys, if you do have a question, please just go ahead and put those in chat. You guys are the ones who run the show. We want to answer your questions. So let me make it more visible and I'll read this out to you. But he says, please talk about some differences in SOP when growing in peat mix beds indoors versus outdoors. So that's kind of a specific question. It excludes things like weather, it's excluding nutrients. It's just specifically, do you do anything different for your peat mix beds? Do you keep them wetter longer outside? I personally don't have an answer because I don't know. I don't grow outside. Do you have any input on that one?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I assume most people know, but SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures. So just how do you
Oops.
handle the beds and things? So our soils and the Westport Blend are primarily peat based. So the thing about peat based beds outdoors, there's two things that come to mind immediately when I think about the difference between indoor and outdoor. The first one is because peat, when it gets really dry, it goes hydrophobic. Outdoors, I would consider using a mulch um, or companion planting to help keep the soil covered, so it doesn't dry out as much. Because when it fully dries out, then you end up with it going hydrophobic, which means it doesn't want to accept water. And so that you'll go to water that bed, and then you take your hand and kind of rough up the surface and be like, this is still bone dry. And I've made that mistake. I still make that mistake sometimes when I water. So that's something you have to be really aware of outdoors. That can
Hmm.
happen indoors, but is less likely to, because you just don't have that same level of solar radiation from indoor lights that you get from the sun. So that's probably
And
difference number one, is just be aware you're watering. Go
okay.
ahead. Sorry.
And to add to that, Brandon's kind of chipped in here, and you mentioned solar radiation, and I just experienced that I went from 3 feet above sea level to about 7,000 feet above sea level, and solar radiation is different. Trust me, you burn a lot quicker in the freaking mountains than you do at the sea level, and that's kind of what Brandon is saying here too. Is that it depends on where you are growing in the country too. Outdoor in LA versus outdoor in Western Washington are different worlds, different
Yeah.
concerns, different humidity, and solar radiation, as you just said. So I wanted to toss that one in there.
Yeah, I mean, on weather like this, when we get a heat wave here in Washington, so we're 80 plus is hot for us. I might be watering every other day in my garden just to keep moisture levels up. So that is a consideration. Consideration number two, outdoors, is because of, and I, again, this will depend on where you live, but here in Washington, we get a lot of rain. And so that bed, after sitting outside at the end of the season and water rushing through it, we're going to leach a lot of the nutrients that are in there, which means come spring, we're kind of starting from scratch again. And we need to re-amend at a higher level. So we know for sure that all the sodium, the chlorides, the nitrates, the potassium, those for sure are going to have leached. But we've probably also lost some calcium, some phosphorus, some sulfur, some of these other nutrients as well.
So, I was just thinking, a difference against indoor and outdoor. People typically are really only running one run outdoors during the year versus indoors where you would redo tests. So I guess at the end of the year, outdoor, you would probably retest until you get things kind of dialed and familiarity. But indoor, you would go with more. Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
Outdoor, I plan. I don't necessarily test my outdoor vegetable garden. One, because of just cost related to the cost of my crop. And I'm not typically growing cannabis. I grew cannabis last year, but every year I have such an aphid pressure and
Mm.
powdery mildew that's just not worth it where I live. They don't finish very well. So
Yep.
I'm going with the assumption that most of my nutrients have leached. So I'm going to add back in. I use our nutrient pack. It's sort of a complete fertilizer. There's other companies that make similar products. You could absolutely use those too. That's sort of the idea behind it. And yes, I see the question about our nutrient pack. It does have sulfur in there, but the sulfur is in the form of sulfates from things like gypsum, which is calcium sulfate. We're not adding agricultural sulfur specifically because we don't want to lower pH any further than we already are at. We like the pH range that we're in because that allows for optimal nutrient uptake while reducing heavy metal and other metals that we don't necessarily want cannabis to take up. So we want sulfur because that has a lot of different physiological benefits for terpene expression and other plant processes. But we're not adding specifically just like agricultural sulfur, but we're getting sulfur from other things like primarily gypsum.
Okay. And you just mentioned there, physical properties of things, and this was an interesting question. I wonder if there is a downside or a chemical or something along the process that would make this less desirable than typical biochar. But JMJ12 is asking a question here. It says, question, can the white ash from barbecue coal beads be added to the grow medium? Would there be a benefit as just far as physical structure to the soil or a nutrient mineral benefit? Uh-oh, I think you're muted. Are you Tad?
With
Can you hear
with
me? Oh,
you're probably
time
getting.
out. Let's see. Okay, can you hear
Oh, I
me?
got a timeout. You can't hear me.
Okay, now I can hear you again. For like from the start of the answer, I didn't hear
Now I
you,
can't hear
and
you. Sorry.
oh no, okay, that's okay.
Try
If you
this.
yep, if you go out and come back in, that may help. I know you're having to do this remote today. That's how dedicated Tad is, guys. Um, but he's okay, so he's probably going to try to reboot. JMJ, I'm going to save this question until Tad gets back here because I've never actually heard of anybody using that or adding it. I know the charcoal sometimes has other things in it in the realm of barbecue charcoal, but interesting question because automatically my brain goes to biochar. So let's see here. I'm going to type something in chat. Let's see. Maybe leave
Oh, I think I'm
and
I
come.
think I'm back. Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Sound okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. You're good.
Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened. So yeah, so the difference between ash and biochar are is twofold. So properly made biochar is pyrolyzed, which means it is heated at extremely high temperatures at very, very low oxygen conditions. When you're making charcoal, you're not getting you're not getting that low oxygen condition. So you're not creating the same thing as what we call biochar, which means it's going to have very different properties. Um, in addition to that, it can be very high in potassium, and it can contain other contaminants, depending on the wood and the material that they're using and how they're burning it. So that is a variable that is good to consider. I can't. There are people that have done it. I don't know, but there is more of an opportunity for metals and other issues potentially being contaminating in the product versus buying specifically a biochar product.
Okay. So slightly different process. And then again, yeah, I mean, every time when I heard the barbecue part of it, I'm like, usually they do add extra chemicals in there for ignition purposes. Um, Here's a good question from Adam. Oh, and real quick before I get back to that one, I just want to shout out to the Owl Pellet and Wicked Deuces, which allegedly I consumed this morning from Blazing, Arizona. So shout out, 2 thumbs up. Actually, you can see the smile right now, courtesy of you. Thank you. Let's go back to Adam's question. He says, okay, and he actually hit me up about this, so I do have kind of thoughts. He wanted to get your thoughts as well. Question. He has a 100-gallon indoor pot. This thing is pretty freaking massive. It's pretty
Yeah.
tall too. 100-gallon indoor pot. 90-day veg, living soil, the 3.0. Should he feed at all? How to get an indoor monster? So,
Yeah.
and let's
So
just
many
let's just
thoughts.
start with yeah. So I mean, my thought
Oh,
again, without us being infinitely familiar,
sorry.
we know of it. We've know people that have used it, but without really knowing what's in there and running a number of things in there, we can just kind of give our opinions. 100 gallons is huge. We always talk organic soil. The larger the container, the better you'll be. The larger the charge in the battery. If you're starting with proper stuff. And, that's a great product. 100 gallons is huge. 90-day veg time. The no joke that I grew with the Westport Blend, you guys all saw that. I just did water only. It was roughly a 30-day veg and a 60-day flowering time, water only. And everybody, this was the fun one too. Everybody who was at the DGC Cup this year, I wasn't able to enter because it requires a lot more than I feel comfortable allegedly traveling with. But I brought the no joke from the video to share with everybody, and it got very good reviews from people. And the reason I mentioned that is those were 7 gallons. Obviously, 100 is bigger than 7. So I imagine 90 days would be still plenty of juice, even if it was long flowering. But the question would be, is it worth that soil mass and expense to do 100 gallons indoors for a single plant? What do you have any thoughts? And again, that's a person,
Yeah.
subjective, but I always like to look at root balls afterwards. I would be shocked if you maxed out 100 gallons worth of soil with just networks of roots. again, depends on how long you go, but I think 90 days, you're in the safe zone there. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what you're saying is that root space is not going to be a limiting factor for
Mm-hmm.
one plant. Fertility, you don't think is going to be a limiting factor for that plant. Um, 100 gallons is a 4x4 bed, really, more or less, at 10 inches of depth. Um, I'll grow 6 to 9 plants in that and create, a canopy. Because here's the other thing too: indoors, you're limited by light from pretty much, you could do under canopy lighting, but you pretty much just top lighting. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to get a lot larger yield necessarily off of a larger plant. You can create that same canopy in, 14 to or 21 days, 30 days of veg that you could in, the same thing. Okay, so he's saying it's just for fun. Yeah, if it's just for fun, then you absolutely could. It's always good to talk to the soil manufacturer um, in terms of what fertility they recommend. But I would think, in our soils at least, I probably want to at days, 2 months in, towards that third month, I probably want to give it some additional fertility for flower, just because it's going to be such a big plant. But man, if you're just gonna have fun with it, yeah, I think you could absolutely do it. I just think it's going to be a lot more pruning,
Yeah.
but you can create
And
something pretty cool looking.
he and it's Adam. He's putting the Westport posse in there, but he's also grown to no joke, and he does a marvelous job. He does mainlining, like sculpting. I don't think is going to be a problem. Is I don't know if anybody remembers the meme or the Scrog King. It's this guy in his basement like this, and it says like Scrog King across his back, but it's like one plant in a huge pot, and it's just an 8-foot table of level canopies, but it's just one plant. So he's got the ability to do that. I wonder if that's what the fun project is going to be, is just like how wickedly wild can I scrog out this plant. And one thing, when I did see the pot, instantly I kind of was started to talk about depth with him. And earlier you just mentioned, really 10 inches is kind of a good soil depth. Is there advantages or disadvantages to going with anything deeper, like indoors? I mean, where does the root zone inhabit with cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, indoors we're not typically, like you said, you grew your whole plant in, let's say, 3 months. That's a pretty typical timeline for a full cycle plant. Um,
Yeah.
at at that cycle pace, you probably aren't going to use a lot more than 10 inches of depth, um, if the plant's even able to get down that far. So that's sort of our recommendation. It also makes it easier for watering, when you don't have a very deep uh,
Right.
soil profile. So you can absolutely go deeper, but I don't see a ton of advantages to it. And it also doesn't allow for as good of drainage, I think, when you start going, 16, 18 inches and more. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, people do it. You can absolutely do it. I've even seen commercial facilities that successfully do it. It's just more expensive. You're paying for double the media, but you're not getting double the yield or fertility necessarily out of it.
Yep, and those are all good considerations. And I'm seeing a lot of the outdoor growers in here be like, hey, that's great for an outdoor, indoor. A couple other people like 25 or 30 would probably be the tops that they go. And that's what I love about chat as well, is we all get to experience and do different things. So when one of us has a question, there's usually somebody out there who's like, I've thought of this and tried it. So getting that input is always great, because that helps us and that helps everybody else in chat too. So we've got a
Yeah.
really good chat gang out here.
You do. You have one of the best, I think. Yeah. Smart
Ah,
people and super supportive of each other. I really love that.
yes, yes, and yeah, we all want to grow good dank. And again, we could be like this. So when you go out to the growers cup, if these people weren't growing good stuff and they wanted to share it with you, you'd be like, ah. So create good growers, because they'll want to share. So yes, create good growers, guys, and you will have unlimited, amazing flower and probably concentrates to smoke too. So
Yeah.
selfishly, teach them to grow.
And I want to say, like,
there are a lot of ways to grow this plant. One of the things that I really push hard on is like, well, one, if you have a way that you like to grow and you're convinced, maybe you use 3 different bottled nutrient lines or product lines and all these different inputs, and you love the way the plant finishes with those genetics. Me, I'm not one to tell you that that way is wrong. My big thing is like, I think we can do it cheaper and achieve similar or better results with less inputs and less cost. But that being said, there are a million ways to grow this plant, and if your way works and you're happy with it, I'm gonna be the last person to tell you that one way is better than another. But I do feel like we get a lot of like, not only is it hard to separate the marketing from the science, but it's really hard to separate like people. There's so much infighting, even in the organic group, about like soil food web versus biodynamics versus permaculture versus I don't know, whatever the heck we do in the living soil realm. So it is what it is.
There, yeah, and hopefully from like the outsider perspective, not being fully vested in one direction or the other, we can sit back and we could take a look at what everybody is saying and see how it kind of really all applies. As you're saying, there is no one size fits all, particularly to growing, even if you are doing it the same way, because as we touched on earlier, environmental factors, climates, there's a lot of things that alter the answers always. And
Yeah, it makes a environment is a huge role. And I was actually talking with a grower the other day, commercial grower who's setting up this big grow, and he was looking at using root wise instead of microbial mass as a microbial problem. He was worried, how would that input things? And one of the things we were talking about with him was like, those microbial inputs are great. There's a lot of things that they do that, we have research to show they can increase yields, but at the end of the day, they're like the smallest variable compared to all the other things we were talking about, like your soil and your watering and really how good the grower is. Like, you can give good soil or a good program to a bad grower and they'll kill the plant, and you can do the exact same thing. You can give a horrible nutrient line to a really good grower and they'll grow fire with it. So I think sometimes we get stuck in the weeds when really, like you said, good growers are good growers. They can grow in anything.
experience. Yeah, I had this conversation many times over the weekend. It's, education and experience are really the keys. Individually, they're great, but in combination, they're really hard to beat. So always kind of keep learning and believe your eyes and believe your experience. And there was someone, oh, Aaron here. Aaron was getting anxious for us to answer a second question for him today. And he says, Chad, what do you do for dry down for super huge buds? Okay. So there's obviously, again, there's going to be variables, climates, humidity. Colorado, very dry. Where I am right now, very moist. There's different trains of thoughts there. 60-60 is kind of the preferred standard with a little bit of moving air. The more that we know about things, the more we're able to control and monitoring things. There's now a step down process that a lot of people have been using and having good success with. But to specifically say, what do you do for super huge buds? If you're worried, so let's just assume you have your environment dialed. Like I was just mentioned, different things that go into it, but let's assume you have that dialed. You can always break that thing up. If you get that big cola, you go in there and you see where it connects, and you just kind of trim up, and you get a little bit of popcorn buds. Well, not popcorn buds, but the buds off of the big cola. You can dry those on like a net or on a screen. Sometimes I frown on that because if you're not diligent about turning them, you'll wind up with a bud with a flat side. But really, if bud rot is your concern, make sure you have the environment dialed, make sure you have air movement in there, and create smaller pieces. That's probably the best advice on huge buds is, yeah, turn them into smaller buds.
Well, I'd say, Aaron, first and foremost, take all your social media pictures while they're big, because they look great for photos.
Yes, always.
Then, really inspect inside of them. I personally like plants that grow smaller buds, specifically because they're easier to grow. They're less chance of pathogens, and you have better airflow. Um, I think those big buds are really, really hard in a lot of cases, especially for botrytis or bud rot. Um, so make sure you're checking inside and you don't have any gray mold growing inside your buds. Um, then I would say we want to get it cold and we want to get it really dry for that first 24 to 36 hours. Really bring the moisture levels down. And then at that point, we want to stabilize closer to the 60-60. But yeah, I agree. Break up those buds when you actually go to hang them. Normally, I won't break down buds, but I also don't like to grow those huge chunky colas specifically for that reason.
Awesome. Sorry, I had a thought to add to that, and then I got distracted by Dave's question asking about my hair regime.
Back on your chair.
It's organic. Dave's not here is my hero. He is awesome. Brandon is chiming in too. Says prune, so you're growing smaller buds. A lot of fimming. You can do that because you're taking away the main apical cola, and you're creating a lot of smaller ones. But that is awesome.
Yeah, I think too, like as much as growing it's important, curing it and having a good cure space is equally important. Being able to have a space that you can really control, that you can get cold and dry when you need to with decent airflow, really allows your buds to finish the way you want them to. Because you don't want to grow an amazing flower and then lose it all in the cure.
It really is half the battle. Yeah, you can ruin a great grow with a bad dry and a bad cure. Um, I guess I won't get into, obviously we're trying to get the chlorophyll out, we're doing these things, but people watching are probably already aware of that. So I'll skip over that. Jada Joyrider, what is the pH of your shampoo? That is a good question. I will check to see if it's on the bottle, but really, guys, it's connected. It's hemp shampoo, HEMPZ, hemps. Go look it up. It's awesome stuff. So yeah, I'm still trying to recover from 3 days of each day successively being the most like cannabis I've consumed in one day since last year's competition. So still trying to recover from that late night of traveling, getting home. And to make it all better, I have my annual physical and blood draw tomorrow. How did that get timed? I don't know. But I'm going to ask him to tell me what my THC level is because it's probably damn high.
Oh, they can check that.
Um,
My brother's a pretty heavy smoker, and Brandon, who's in the chat, is also a heavy smoker, and they both had good blood work. So, it may have other
yeah.
detrimental effects, but it doesn't seem to affect your blood work too bad. They both
Okay, well
smoke
that's good.
bars.
I really do want them to give me the THC percentage though. Like I want to ask. We'll see if I do, because it goes okay. So it goes back to the argument Washington State and many other states, as far as like the comparable to blood alcohol level. There is one for THC. It hasn't successfully really held up in court, and that's why we don't see it applied a lot of times. But that doesn't mean you're not going to go through hell until it just goes away. But Washington has a mandatory minimum to where if you're a regular consumer, even if you don't consume for 48 hours, which is a long time after the effects of cannabis have worn off, you likely, if you're a regular consumer, you likely will still be beyond that threshold. So after 3 days of consuming the heaviest amount that I have all year, I want the trophy, man. It's like the high score on the game at the arcade. I want to see what my level is. And again, I bet it's above the limit. And no, I'm not going to consume for 24 hours before I go, which means I need to stop pretty soon. Good thing I started early today. Okay, sorry guys. People are getting delusional travel rants at this point. So hopefully, if you guys have questions, please type them into chat so you don't have to hear me and my nonsensical stuff today. It is June. Things are starting to heat up, Tad, for outdoor growers. what is probably one thing that they should be thinking about right now? Is this a time of year where pest pressures tend to increase? Is irrigation frequency more important when we have higher temperatures? As outdoor growers, what would be something that comes to your mind right now for this particular time of year?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the sweet spot outdoors around here, where the plants look great. Everything's, growing well. We're not really into flower yet. This is the easy part. Yeah, I mean, there
Okay.
are a few things when it's really hot out. You probably need to water more frequently. You may consider shade cloth. I see someone actually just was posting that as I was saying it. That's great advice. Um, if you have the ability to use it. Other than that, though, there are some things you can do, like raising silica levels will help with drought stress. Um,
Okay.
Mycorrhizal fungi has been known to help with drought stress. Really, proper watering is the biggest thing there. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. It's really, at least in Western Washington, it's the end of the season, and it's like, oh, are these going to finish, or are they going to beat the pests and the cold weather? We get one cold night and then a warm day and or a heavy rain and then high humidity, and then everything just
Yeah.
botrytis just comes out of nowhere and your whole season's over. And I don't know, we just done that way too many times. Yeah. One person mentions calcium. Yeah, having high levels of calcium is really important. Yeah.
Front load the cow may fully early. That's always one of those fun ones to say. Let's
Yeah.
see here. There's a
I don't love
question.
CalMag because typically we have sufficient magnesium in living soils in general, but calcium will go through a lot more. Everyone want to have it at a much higher level than the ratios that we typically see in CalMag, but um, yeah, it depends.
Okay, and that's always a good answer. And this is kind of another question like we were talking about earlier is there's different methods. If you're getting good results with what you're doing and you like it, kind of continue to do it unless you're harming it. And this person, and this is going to be subjective. I'll give my opinion. Might be the same as yours, but he says, "What do you think about going KNF versus dry amendments?" Again, I've seen them both work successfully. My hardest part about KNF is one, it does take a lot of work. I hope you have a lot of time, but it's a very low cost of entry. I get hung up on numbers. I want to know how many milliliters do I need to give it. And with the tools that most people commonly have, we're not really able to get to a per milliliter dosage with a lot of KNF recipes. It's just more or less do this, apply this, and you're seeing these nice results versus dry amendments, which is something where you can absolutely kind of formulate, calculate, and test. Am I going off the chart there, or do you have different thoughts or similar thoughts about what do you think about going KNF versus dry amendments? The time difference is, or there is a difference in time commitment, correct?
For sure. I don't know that I see them as like a versus sort of thing. They're very different. I mean, KNF, like you said, is a lot of labor. It's a lot about biology forward approach that's very affordable, but you do lose some of that accuracy or confidence in what you're making and what the levels of fertility of those products are. Um, Dry amendments, I assume we're talking about like soil testing or even just adding a dry organic fertilizer. Um, Still reasonably affordable. We have a better idea of what the NPK levels are. Um, yeah, they're just different approaches. If I was on a real budget, or I was just kind of more casual about my growing and wanted to experiment, I think KNF makes a lot of sense. Or if I'm somewhere that I have very limited resources where it's very hard to get nutrients, absolutely, I think those are great options. Um, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. I got a couple questions started here. Real quick, Foul Bundy is asking, kind of based off of that question. He says, could you use an EC meter in the KNF ferments to check the ppm and then just feed accordingly? and it should give you an idea of the nutrient load, but it doesn't specifically tell you which portion of that is from which mineral, which nutrient. So it's just a catch-all, and there's no true granular insight to that.
And we don't know if that is primarily sodium or chlorides or something that we don't necessarily want in high levels. Because I've seen some ferments that have been very high in sodium, shockingly, depending on what vegetables they use and things like that. So an EC meter wouldn't give you that information. It would just tell you, oh, this is a high EC. And you think, okay, I'm adding a lot of fertility, but really you're adding sodium, which the plant doesn't want or need anyway. You're just raising osmotic pressure in the root system. So, yeah.
Okay. And then Brandon, always helpful in chat as well. He's always adding his 2 cents here. But let's go to the next question, C. Raspy. And thanks, guys, for rolling in the questions right now. This is what we love to do. All right, C. Raspy, or maybe it's Craspy. He is growing in 15-gallon grassroots pots indoors with the KIS biochar soil. And his question is it necessary to push Mammoth P? Are there preferred alternatives to the Mammoth P?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say no. In 15-gallon pot, you could, using fresh biochar soil, you could just go water only. And I feel very confident, unless you grow a massive tree, this is a huge plant outdoors, you'll be just fine. You'll have plenty of fertility. That being said, we did some research with Mammoth P back in the day and got a statistically significant bump in yield by adding it in at the recommended rates. Now, Mammoth P is out of business. They're no longer around. So if you're still getting it, it's probably getting old at this point, or it's going to be unavailable soon. The founder of Mammoth P, Colin Bell, now works over at Microbial Mass, which was actually founded by a guy I know, Andres, who was a researcher who was friends with David Perrone, who's been on the podcast. Anyway, they have a very good product. We do sell it. I work with them, so I do have a financial interest in saying that I like the product. But you can also get microbes other ways. They're going to be different microbes. That's a specific consortium of microbes that work really well together. But I think Brandon listed a whole bunch of other things like aerated compost teas, trichoderma, lactobacillus. Yeah, all these different other types of ways to get microbes. So, yeah, you don't necessarily need to add those things.
Yep. Okay. Doctor, it is too live. Come on. We're always live on Tuesdays.
We're screwing
And
up way too much for it not to be live.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good sign there. But yeah, if you guys are just watching on the Chad Westport YouTube channel, make sure you go to the KIS Organics YouTube channel as well, because this Tuesday happens every week. Instead of me, you're going to be chatting with Tad and Brandon, and Ben sometimes comes in. So guys, this isn't just a once a month thing if you've only been here. And if you are from the KIS Organics channel, please come on over to Chad Westport and like and subscribe over there. A lot of good mycelium talk in here. Let's see. Let me go back to the questions. Dank Gardner had one here. It says, question, anything more diverse than gypsum for buffer or to buffer RO water, not just calcium sulfur, looking for something with all nutrients and minerals. So RO water strips everything out. You kind of want add a little bit back in before giving it to your plants. Why? Because it creates a buffer for pH. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it keeps the water from bonding with other things that are not necessarily good, like metals and things like that. So, yeah, gypsum is just really nice. It's calcium sulfate, because one of the nice things about it is you really can't overdo it. The solubility of it, the release rate of calcium sulfate is quite optimal in a lot of ways for the way that cannabis utilizes it. Um, You could use probably some, tiny amount of any sort of complete organic fertilizer, but then you're probably also getting a little bit more contaminants like heavy metals and things like that in there. And it'd be a little bit, um, it'd just be a little bit harder to manage because you'd be picking up some NPK, which is much easier to manage outside of your irrigation water. The amount you would have to add, I would think, to buffer would probably add a substantial amount of NPK unless you're using a very low level NPK product.
Right on. I'm just scouting because I know we're coming up against a hard out here at 3. So I've got another question up here to toss. We might be able to get to one more if you guys have them. But Mr. Rourke 420 says, while weeding wood mulched beds, I keep finding mycelium pockets in the wood chips. Would there be any benefit in adding some of these infected chips to an indoor 3x3 bed? So we're talking about taking something from outside and bringing it to an indoor bed, but he's focused on the mycelium and the benefit that it could bring. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I've had some mushrooms growing in my KIS Organic in the Westport Blend. Open the bag, I'm like, it's a little mushroom. It's active. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That'd be a pretty hard no for me. I try to limit anything going from outside into my room. Once the soil's in place and I've maybe treated it with some, mosquito bits or some nematodes, I brought in beneficial insects to try and eliminate any potential pests, or I might have sprayed, my crop in there. The last thing I want to do is bring in anything that could bring in a pathogen or a pest into my room. Um, if you wanted to really do this and you wanted to do it before your plants were in there and then maybe treat it afterwards, I guess you could, but I don't think you'd see a lot of benefit from it, personally. You probably already have, you know, fungi in your soil. If you're managing it well, you're not going to get a huge bump by adding in these wood chips, and is my guess. Those are just, saprophytic fungi breaking down high carbon sources, which is these wood chips. Not doesn't necessarily help, I think, your overall soil fertility in your bed.
Okay. That's, that it's a great thing to frame in that just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. You have to consider what the benefit to it is. Does that, the mycelium there translate into what we're thinking it's going to do to the roots? Is that a real thing or not? And two, also to frame, the commercial aspect of it. These are multi-million dollar decisions potentially. So when you are very strict about, I don't take anything from outside indoor, that's because it could be multiple millions of dollars to people. So those are really the pro way of doing things and thinking of things. At least in my head, it can be, things can be very black and white when it comes to your the SOPs of your IPM, cultural practices, clones. You always want to, dunk clones, quarantine clones. There's a lot of things that we do or that we should do, and we know that you should do, that at least 80% of us aren't doing. And for those reasons. So yeah.
Yeah. So just to give a little more context, like when I go visit a commercial facility, I make sure that I put on clean, fresh clothes and clean shoes prior to going to that facility. If I have to go to two facilities in the same day, which is very rare and I hate to do it, um, like I had to go to one facility and do a tour, and then I went to the second facility. I changed my pants and my shoes and all of my clothes, and I still didn't go into the facility. I just said, hey, can we just talk out here? Um, just because I don't want to risk cross contamination. And then when I got home, all those clothes went from my trunk into my washing machine. And even just like if I'm out in my vegetable garden, I don't want to come right inside in those same clothes and go and check out my indoor cannabis garden. Um, you may think, the risk is low, but it just takes one hitchhiker, just a few spores on you to eventually cause an issue in your room. So it's good to always be thinking about that. Always go to your indoor space first with clean clothes, clean shoes, and then go outside and do whatever you have to do outdoors.
And that's, yeah, again, that's why yeah, okay, tangent there. tangent, but some of the best tools that you can use for growing cannabis, especially IPM, are free. They're just common sense. You have to put them into practice and just strictly adhere to them. So that's the prevention is the best method. One more question. Well, maybe, you know what, Travis, I appreciate the question. Let me lightning round this one real quick. He says, what would you do best NPK ratio for seed development with pollinated plants being switched back to 18-6 light schedule? I don't know. I know Rasta Jeff is big on the 18-6 after it has been pollinated. I have not tried that yet because I am familiar with what I do and I know it works, and I don't have haven't had the plant to experiment with it. So we can answer this another time because it gets a little bit more in depth. But specifically, I just wanted to say I've not grown my seeded plants under the 18-6 schedule. It would be different than my 12-12 schedule. But Tad, let people know where they could find you, anything that you got going on or coming up, please.
Yeah, well, so I have the podcast, Cannabis, Cultivation, and Science. You can always check out if you find this information interesting. You can hear from real experts that know way more on a given topic. So I saw some people asking about silica. I did a whole podcast with a silica expert, Dr. Wendy Zellner. I highly recommend checking out if you want to know all the answers about silica from the source, for example. We've got KIS Organics. We make the Westport Blend of soils. If you haven't seen Chad's video of his plants in it and how he grows from start to finish, it's a great video. And you can get that same soil now. So I'm really excited about that. And other than that, I guess we have a conference coming up. Yeah, that's the episode. And the conference is the Cannabis Cultivation and Science Conference. It's going to be in Bozeman, Montana. I cannot wait. It's going to be a lot of my favorite podcast guests. It's going to be a little bit different than your traditional, cup or conference. Our goal here was to create something that was very professional in terms of the information, but it's just going to be a bunch of growers. So in that respect, it's going to be very casual. And on it's a 3-day event. We're charging $200 for tickets, and that includes all access to everything, with the exception of there's a workshop either on HVAC and airflow with Dr. Greenhouse on the first day. That's $75 extra, or you can choose the workshop with the bug lady, Suzanne Wainwright Evans, in the morning, and that's $75. Otherwise, it's just $200. And we're getting a lot of really cool sponsors. Like I'm going to be able to offer a Photone free code there for the advanced metrics, and some free virus testing, a bunch of other different perks in the swag bag. So I'm really excited for that. And then, the third day is a tasting event with the Living Soil Alliance providing all the cannabis, and you can literally go through and try best of what Montana has to offer. And that'll be fun, and then get on a plane and cruise on home. So yeah, we're really excited for it, but it's going to be all very science-based information. So we're having researchers or people that are really the top of their field speaking on the topic. So for water, we have Dram coming out. For pathology, we have Dr. Michael Brownbridge from BioWorks coming out. So I really try to get the best people in their respective fields at what they do. So yeah, I'm excited.
Call the expert. Call the expert. That's what the experts do when they call the expert in that field.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. Tad, thank you so much for making time today. I look forward to doing this again. Everybody, KIS Organics YouTube channel every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Check it out. It's the Q&A driven by you guys, the viewers. So thank you for hanging out. Thank you for watching. I will be back later this evening with the Caribou Heart TV show, 6 p.m. my time. That's about 3 hours from now. This Saturday, again, the Fourth House Genetics. You're going to see a whole bunch of stuff coming out on Chad Westport YouTube channel. And Tad, I hope to see more stuff coming out from you too. So everybody,
Thanks, Chad.
thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later.
Appreciate you.
See ya.